So you may have seen in my previous videos that I'm on a mission to challenge myself in different ways in order to develop as an artist, and this week I really had a huge urge to play with colour. And so whenever I get these strong feelings of wanting to do something with my art, I always want to follow it, as I feel like it's the most organic way of refining my artistic voice and developing my art style. So when I think of colour, I think of fruit, and I love doing fruit studies. I think it's the combination of so much colour, texture, variation of lighting, especially when painting fruit trees. You get that contrast between the shadows and the really bright highlights where the sun is hitting. So I think fruit and fruit trees can make some of the best reference photos to practice from. Initially, I wanted to limit myself to a specific colour palette because I'm the type of person that is really drawn to those big palettes with a million colours, and I wanted to learn a bit more about working within the limits of just a few colours. But then I realised I wanted to actually start with learning more about colour mixing, and so I limited myself to the primary colours, cyan, yellow and magenta, as well as black and white. I then picked out the most colourful fruit references, and I got these from my free trial with Adobe stock, and I set out to paint them with just the primary colours in order to learn more about colour mixing and understanding how to make different colours. I'm very intuitive when it comes to colour mixing. I'm not formally trained with painting or with art in general. I would say I'm in the self-taught category, even though I feel like I've informally learned from the internet, so I don't know if I would consider that completely self-taught. So I've never really taken the time to learn colour theory with paint. Like I know the basics of what colours make what, but that's really the extent of it. So with this spread, I really wanted to be very present with observing how I was making my colours. I really want to start making art with more limited colour palettes. I think that limited palettes can create such beautiful vibes. I think that there's an energy that colour transmits, and knowing how to select colours and push in the colour limits of what you're painting, like not necessarily replicating the image you have in front of you in the most colour accurate way, but being able to play with colour to create a feeling, that is exactly what I want to achieve. So although I didn't do that in this spread, in the sense that I didn't limit my colour choices, I mixed all the colours I wanted to, and I generally replicated the colours I was seeing in the reference photo. I think it was a great place to start, to have the limit of the primary colours in order to become more familiar with how paint mixes and how colours are made. So this isn't going to be a tutorial on exactly how I achieve these colours, but I really just wanted to share my painting process and some thoughts that I had generally throughout, and hopefully inspire you to also place some limits on your next piece of art. I really think that working within some sort of boundary, be it doing monochromatic studies or placing a time limit or even the size of the art you're creating, it can help you learn so much, as it forces you to problem solve within the limit you've created, which I think helps develop your skill set. At least that's what I'm observing within my own journey. With these oranges, I wanted to achieve that effect of them popping off the page, so I drew them coming outside of the frame. But I was also really curious if I could achieve the vibrancy of the orange. I think I had it in my head that to achieve certain vibrant hues, you need to have the paint straight out of the tube, which I think can be true for some colours for sure. However, I was able to overall achieve all the hues I wanted for this one. Because I was mixing my own colours, I made sure to clean my palette between pieces to maintain the vibrancy of the colours, because as soon as you introduce black or white into the mix, it can go a bit muddy, so cleaning brushes and making new space on the palette is super important in maintaining the brighter hues intact. I found these apples harder than the oranges, and I think that came down to the red of the apples. It's really hard to brighten red. If you add white, it becomes more pink and muted, and too much yellow makes it more orange. And on top of that, I found it less easy to layer. And initially I had put down too dark of a red, and I was finding it hard to restore the vibrancy of the red by layering more paint on top like I normally do. But I found that by adding a combination of pinks and oranges, I started to recapture the vibrancy, especially when I also started to darken the shadows with a more purplish hue, as the contrast really made the red pop. Which was actually a great reminder that colours can change by just being placed beside different colours. For example, the way you perceive a red next to a purple is different to the way you perceive that same red next to a light pink. So I took a lot longer with the apples than I did with the oranges, but I really did like how it ended up looking, and I love the contrast of the blues in the sky and the red. Now with the lemons, I tried to experiment a little bit, and I did the background foliage with a square angled brush, and I tried to be looser with it. But there was something I couldn't quite get right with this one, and although I wanted to stick to that loose approach, I ended up really wanting to tidy it all up by doing tiny details, because there was something I wasn't quite achieving, I guess. Something that fruit studies has also helped me learn is the colour of shadows. Understanding how shadows vary in colour, and not just adding black to darken the colour, but really observing the shadow by itself and picking out the most accurate colour to the shadow in isolation. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying about how colours are perceived differently when they're next to other colours. So oftentimes we look at really bright colours and the shadows just in comparison look like grey, right? But in reality, if you isolate that shadow colour, it's often actually not a grey, and then you can really see that here with the lemons that are in the background that are not in the sun. They're not just a grey, but they are more of a desaturated yellow pulling towards brown with hints of green in there as well. The sun is setting so early now, which is hard for many different reasons, but I really only like painting with natural light, so I decided to leave the spread there. The next day I touched up on some of those details because I really still wasn't loving something about this study. There was something about the looseness that I didn't quite hit right. It kind of made me approach the next piece differently, and I went back to that more illustrative, less loose approach. I loved these peaches. This piece was my favourite of all of them because it was one where I was able to push the colours a little bit more outside the box. Like, I didn't follow the exact colours that were in the reference, and I just loved the combination of the pinks and the oranges and the vibrancy that I created. So I'm probably going to sound like a complete amateur saying this, but I was so in awe at how these primary colours created such a huge range of colours that were so vibrant. I think maybe because I was so present with the process, but also because I don't normally colour mix so much, so I wasn't used to this experience. After doing this spread, I definitely want to do more where I'm doing my own mixing, and I think this is also going to help me a lot on my portrait journey. If you saw my last video where I do monochrome portraits, you'll know that I'm building up to doing full colour portraits. And I think doing portraits with just the primary colours is going to simplify my process a lot, so I'm really excited to try that out. Let me know what you thought of this spread. I'd love to hear your own experiences too of colour mixing and your process. Do you also love those giant palettes with 70 colours, or do you prefer colour mixing yourself? If you are interested in a more in-depth process of how I mix colours or a tutorial, I'd be really happy to do that too. I hope you have a really amazing rest of your day and that it's full of creativity and art making, and I'll see you in my next video.